Welcome to the Confident Retirement Podcast. How confident are you when it comes to life's biggest money decisions? What is real financial peace and how can you get it? Kris Flammang and Mark Peachy are the founders of LPF Advisors in Sarasota, Florida. They bring together the brightest minds to show you how to have a more confident financial future. They empower listeners with common sense concepts and financial wisdom. And now, here are your hosts, LPF Advisors. Hey, welcome everybody to the Confident Retirement Podcast. I'm your host here as always, Kris Flammang. And today I have the honor of welcoming Jeff Schreiber to the podcast. His South Carolina-based family law practice focuses on predictability and stability for clients while guiding them through unpredictable circumstances. Jeffrey, thanks for being here with me today and welcome to the show.
Thank you, Kris.
Yeah, so let's hop in. You have an interesting background. I was kind of checking you out online, not stalking you, but just checking you out on your website. So take me through kind of a brief history on your background and how you got to where you are today.
Sure. My undergrad is in journalism from Auburn University.
I saw that.
Quickly discovered after that working at newspapers wasn't really going to pay the bills. Did a little sales job for a couple of years, kind of came out of a shell a little bit and decided, mid 2000s to go back to law school. Mm-hmm. And I've had this place open for about 11 years. Used to do a little bit higher volume. It's a family law practice entirely, divorce, custody, all the Jerry Springer stuff that nobody really likes to deal with. And over the past, we ran a fairly high volume practice, tried desperately to treat people as though we didn't have a high volume practice. And over the past couple of years, I've transitioned mostly into mediation, where I spend 3 to 5 days. Well, we book 5 days a week. I spend those days trying to bridge gaps between people on things that they just simply can't get an agreement on.
Yeah, good. Okay, and we'll dive into that a little bit because I see that as a trend with more people mediating, which I think overall is a good thing. So is there something maybe that you know now that you wish you knew when you started your law practice? If you could go back in time and tell the younger you some advice or give them a tidbit, what would that be?
Occasionally when we are negotiating a deal, particularly when it comes to asset division and alimony, you will have the supported spouse just dissatisfied with the amount that they're getting offered. And a lot of times I like to dial up a compound interest calculator just to be able to show Mrs. So-and-so, or to be fair, sometimes Mr. So-and-so, how the small amount that they may, a relatively small amount that they might be getting from their husband or wife's account will blossom over the years. And every single time I bring up a compound interest calculator, I have to fight the urge to travel back in time and punch myself in the face for not starting my own retirement earlier. It's funny. We get to, as part of our job, counsel a lot of younger people too. They come in 7-year itch, 3-year itch, whatever it may be. And, especially military members who aren't taking advantage of their military retirement options, and talk to these kids about things and start early. That's, that is the hardest part.
That's the tidbit, the eighth wonder of the world, compound interest.
Love it.
Yeah.
Love it and hate it for myself.
Yeah, right. But there's still some time to take advantage of it. So how did you come to decide on the focus of your practice? I know that you worked for a family law firm before you started your own shop. So what was that the reason, or or how'd you come to that conclusion?
No, I knew toward the end of law school, I went to law school at Rutgers in Camden, New Jersey. And I think my focus, I always thought I was going to get into insurance law or something like that, bad faith litigation. And the very, very last semester, we had a family law motion practice course that was taught not by professors, but by 2 practitioners. Okay. And they would bring in their judges in the area, and we would argue motions. And I enjoyed the idea of helping people. I'm a child of divorce, as are many of us. And I knew I had the kind of a knack for it. I'm always been fairly good at compartmentalizing, subordinating emotional logic, and I knew that would come in handy. but it's been interesting. There's never a dull moment.
No, and everything's always changing. Different circumstances every time. Different personalities.
Not just different circumstances, different personalities. You see societal changes.
Yeah.
The level of entitlement that is growing.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I'd love to say it's just in the younger people, but it's not. And the level of expectations of life that are growing. Maybe it's social media, people seeing how others are living, all the vacations that are going on.
Right.
It definitely changes things. And then, of course, market forces, too. When I started my firm in 2012, we were just coming off of, and I was practicing a little bit before that. We were just coming out of 2008, and nobody had equity in houses. Mm-hmm. We were dividing debt.
Yeah.
If they had equity, it was the anomaly. And then now it's, you'll see, yesterday I mediated a case where a house had gained $200,000 in equity of a $400,000 house in less than 2 years.
Less than 2 years. Yeah. Yeah.
Just entirely by market forces. It's ridiculous.
Yeah. So that's a good segue then into something I wanted to ask you. So do you have an ideal client, or maybe describe for us what your ideal client is? Not the situation of their mediation or their separation, but just people that you enjoy working with as an ideal.
Well, it depends. If it's a case involving children, I want somebody who is valuing their children more than they're valuing their accounts, or more than they're focused on even their marriage. I want people who love their children more than they hate their ex. And it's not always out there. Mm-hmm. If it's a financial, some of the biggest hurdles we have are situations in which there's been an overall dependency in a relationship, and an equity and knowledge, and an equity and involvement. So you will have people, and this is of all ages, who are completely unaware of their own financial situation. I've seen younger people that, people who get married young. Remember, we are in the Deep South. And not that doesn't happen elsewhere, and they'll be in their mid to late 20s, and they don't know where any of the money goes. And then you'll have older folks. I recall early on in my career helping a guy. His wife was in appropriations, CPA and appropriations work for the federal government. So she got to move money around. And I remember dealing with him, and he had never even set up any sort of bill pay on banks. He didn't know how to do a monthly budget. He had more than enough retirement coming in from his own pension work. But it's just the overall dependency that can lead to ignorance, and it's tough. So I do like people that are keyed in a little bit. I'm not a financial advisor. I'm not a tax lawyer. I'm not an accountant. Mm-hmm. So we do a lot of spitballing, and people who are engaged are always the best way to go.
Yeah. Yeah. Or they have those professionals that they can lean on and give them the concept on those things.
We've got a great network of people in this area, trustworthy people who, I would trust with my own family's money that we send them to, and it helps a lot.
Yeah. Okay. So do you think there are some misconceptions that people have about what it is that you do, or what you can accomplish for them, as an attorney? What might those be?
I'll get to the latter. And misconceptions about the divorce attorney. I mean, you see how depicted on television, and sometimes it's true. Lawyers in general, I think, get a more money-focused perception about them. I pay my bills the same as everybody else. They're lean times. They're not so lean times. Conceptions about what we can do for people. Absolutely. The family court in general, it's not a place where dreams are made, right? Mm-hmm. Financially, we're inherently taking one household with maybe one income or maybe two incomes and dividing it into two households with one apiece. Mm-hmm. It's not going to be the same. And as much as the courts and the system might be designed to make sure that nobody's eating ribeye while the other's eating ground chuck, nobody's eating ribeye. It's, you're picking up the day olds sometimes. People tend to think that because we're dealing with issues that are really important to them, these are our children we're talking about. These are our homes. These are the additions, the deck that I built with my bare hands. Sometimes they're material things, end tables, refrigerators. people tend to think that because these things are really important to them, that they'll be really important to the court. Right. And that's not necessarily the case. It's not going to fix everything. It's going to split a baby. Mm-hmm. And I think expectation management is key, but not a lot of lawyers want to do that. It's not great for people saying, sure, be my lawyer, when you're telling them how bad it could go. Mm-hmm. But it's a necessary conversation.
Mm-hmm. Well, and you bring up a good point, which is this is for most people one of life's biggest transitions. They've even kind of compared it to grieving like a death. Right. There's a big, never gone through it. So how do you go about kind of de-stressing the process or helping to manage expectations for people when they may not have the right expectations for what's going to happen?
Well, it starts with knowledge. On financial cases, we absolutely have to sit down early on and provide an idea as to where things can go. Mm-hmm. It's for child-related cases, we have to get and gauge where a particular client is on are they going to appreciate the other person as a parent, or are they going to look at them as a sperm donor or just a babysitter? It comes from frank discussions early on, and taking the stress out of people relieving people's stress will often require a level of handholding that I don't think you have to do in many other types of mm-hmm. legal work, aside from maybe some personal injury work.
Yeah.
But it just takes detail, and not all of, I'm blessed to work with some great folks, great colleagues. But there are those that just are in it for the paycheck.
Mm-hmm. Well, I would think there's an educational component to it. And then I think about setting expectations where telling them in advance, like, this is how bad of an outcome we could have, because no one likes bad surprises, right? Good surprises are fine, but no one likes a bad surprise. Right. So if you can tell this is how bad it could get, no, we're not going to shoot for that. We're going to try to aim for much better. But then at least they have an idea of an expectation.
I have to remind people that I'm not necessarily a pessimist. I'm maybe a cynic, maybe an optimist with experience, but it's not unlike, and again, not a financial advisor, but I would imagine that if you're having a meeting with somebody who's looking to have their wealth managed or their money managed, if you do projections, you don't start with 2012. You start with projections based upon old numbers from long ago, that sort of thing.
That includes some bad times in there, some bad markets, right? Yeah, it needs to be realistic.
Exactly.
Well, and then are there some what are people's biggest fears or concerns that you commonly encounter? So you have an initial meeting, someone comes in, and you say, well, tell me a little bit about your situation. There's got to be some commonality there with what they're really afraid of or what they're concerned about. What are those things commonly?
Even those people that are, in fact, maybe more so for those people who are aware of their financial situation, it is the idea of, how am I going to make ends meet? Mm-hmm. Am I going to have to pick up from the house that I'm in or the apartment that I'm in and disrupt my kids going to a different school? Mm-hmm. Where the Charleston area, which extends out here into Summerville, has a tremendously high cost of living. It is the increase in rental requirements and the increase in mortgage rates has caused a lot of people, hey, how are we going to make this work? Mm-hmm. And sometimes there's no easy answer. Sometimes there is dependence on family. Sometimes there is a multifamily situation, not necessarily all, it's a duplex, it's an apartment. Sometimes, unfortunately, when it comes to these life situations, not everybody can continue to live the same way as they were. Sure. And that is by far the biggest financial concern. You've got concerns about, children and where my husband or wife can't parent in the way that I can. Mm-hmm. He's not going to have them eating organically. Well, ma'am, not everybody's a bean sprouts kind of guy. Right. But it's some of the stuff we see is fairly off the wall.
Yeah. Yeah. The stuff that people are really, really concerned about.
And it's it's all emotional management, whether it's financial issues or whether it's children related issues. It's emotional management. We're as much counselors as we are counsel.
Yeah.
And I'm not a licensed counselor in any way. I just have practiced family law for a dozen years.
Yeah.
So it's
and that's that societal trend that you're talking about, where you're hoping that people have some level of maturity where they can self-reflect and look at that and say, okay, well, I want to get to a conclusion so we can both move on with our life. But you probably see that less and less, adults being less and less capable of that, or it's tougher for them. And that's why I'm kind of interested. So you mentioned earlier that your practice is either primarily or mostly, or you're moving towards a mediation type of framework. So what was the motivation behind that? Why do you think that is when it can work? Why do you think that's the way to go? I mean, I agree with you, but I just like to hear you say it.
I used to thrive on the drama, the daily drama. All right, we're going to fix it. We're going to go to court. We're going to look, you can't act like a pain in the rear end and not expect some consequences. I enjoyed it. And I think COVID, not being able to get into courts as frequently as we could. So it was a lot of, well, I know that he's not paying his child support, but it might not be it might be a couple more months than normal to get in. That really hurt, not being able to get into court. And I just started to really dread the next text message or phone call or email that took me out. And there are very, very few cases that either cannot settle between people or should not settle. There are certainly some where people just got to hear it from a judge, but those are your alternatives: agreement or trial. And trial's expensive. Trial's fun sometimes for us, but it's expensive. And there are times where people are willing to burn the ships. They're willing to just go at it. They're happy to spend $50,000 to go after 40. Yeah, right. And sometimes you just can't control those folks. You can't control that situation. But for the most part, I get a hold of a case at 9 o'clock or 9:30 in the morning, and by the end of the day, these folks are done. They have an agreement between them that handles everything. And sure, they might have not necessarily loved it, but nobody likes everything in the family court. We know we're getting close to an agreement when everybody's unhappy. Mm-hmm. Please yell at me about the exact same thing. Say he's getting everything he wants, and then the other room say she's getting everything she wants. I love it. It's nice to be able to affect change in a 8-hour period that, as a litigator, sometimes took in excess of a year. Yeah. So it's really nice. Right.
Well, and it seems like the shift was you got a rush from the litigation before, and now the rush is switched to we were able to do this with an agreeable conclusion in 8 hours.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Sometimes longer.
Sometimes. Right. But probably not a year.
It's no, that would be right. That would be unfortunate. We will go into the wee hours sometimes, but usually it's toward the end of the day. And when everybody has control, that's where it's best. At best in a litigation situation, you are putting your children and your finances and your retirement and everything along those lines in the hands of a judge that I love our judges. I've got many friends that are on the bench. They're better suited for that work than I am, but they don't know these people. He's just like me. I'm not a CPA. They're not CPAs. Mm-hmm. And they're going to do their best for sure. But the litigants have no control over it. Why not let them have control over their own destinies? There are some people who want money now. There are some people who want money in the long term. Mm-hmm. And it's an interesting dynamic to measure out and see.
Yeah. Yeah, we're all different. That's for sure. Okay, let's shift gears just a little bit. I'm curious. Going forward, you said you had made a switch to the mediation, used to be high volume, not so much anymore. So what do you kind of see as being the biggest opportunity moving forward for your practice?
I only take on a few cases so I can devote a lot more time to them, which is wonderful. Not that they necessarily, maybe time is the wrong way to put it, because time is money. Attention is probably the way to go, undivided attention. From a mediation standpoint, we have something I keep hearing about 45 people a day moving to this area, and it's been that way for years. Mm-hmm. And there's no shortage of opportunity for people that are going through that tough time that needed to finish up. And the sooner they move on, the sooner they move on for kids, they move on for their employers, they move on for themselves. I look forward to expanding that and continuing to try to do well and continue to learn. There's so many different things to learn. As I said, not a CPA. I would love to be able to know more instantaneously rather than delegate to some of the experts.
Yeah, or have to put in the work.
Right.
All right. Now, on the flip side of that, though, what do you think maybe is your biggest challenge or obstacle? Something in your practice or in the business that you want to overcome?
Mine or overall? Because overall,
could be overall, could be yours. It's open-ended.
Overall, it's the overall degradation of society and expectations. I do think I was fortunate to come in on the economic upswing. It'll be very interesting to see how this particular living adapts to recession and adapts to changing times. Sure. Mm-hmm. I know that for a long time, there were situations in which there just wasn't enough money. People couldn't afford to get divorced. Mm-hmm. People couldn't afford to move on. And I've seen a couple trends like that recently, but for the most part, people are still sitting on a nice little egg when it comes to equity and their 401ks are still appreciating and whatnot. For a little while, it was hairy, but
it was a little rough.
Seeing how it adapts and making sure we adapt ourselves, I think is one of the biggest things. Aging population is definitely a challenge. We're starting to see a few more of the 30, 40-year marriages, mm-hmm. Which is always heartbreaking.
Yes.
Come on, you've gone 45 years.
Yeah.
Let's go.
Right.
Finish it up.
Yeah. Right.
But there are some people who have been stifling, happiness for years. And okay, if it's a reality, we'll guide you through it. But it'll be interesting to see and kind of frightening to see those who don't have the money set aside. It's difficult when you've got an older client who's been dependent upon a husband who hasn't been putting things away or who's, drank his cash flow.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden it's, what do we do now?
Right.
Sometimes there's no easy answer.
Yeah, there isn't. Right. God, make the best of a bad situation.
Yeah.
Okay. Now let's upswing it. So if people want to learn more about you or contact you, what's the best way for them to do that?
Sure. I've got a website that badly needs a redesign. It is Lowcountry Divorce and Family Law .com. It is still geared toward litigation and whatnot, but there's some pretty good information on there.
Yeah.
It is always happy to chat about things. And I also have a great network of colleagues that I can kind of steer folks to as well if we're not a good fit.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So I encourage everyone to check out the website. And Jeffrey, listen, I want to thank you for being here with me today. It's been a great conversation, very insightful. I'm happy to spend the time with you. And I want to thank everybody for tuning in and listening, watching the Confident Retirement Podcast, where we are hoping to raise the financial confidence of everyday people to another level, one show at a time. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in and listening. Jeffrey, thanks again.
Thank you, Kris.
You've been listening to the Confident Retirement Podcast with Kris and Mark from LPF Advisors. For more information on them and retiring confidently, please visit lpfadvisors.com. If your ears are pleased and your mind is now at ease, do share the program with your friends and subscribe wherever podcasts are found.